you would please stand and for the reading of Scripture and remain standing for the morning prayer. Matthew 27 says, "Early in the morning, all the chief priests and elders of the people came to the decision to put Jesus to death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate, the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the chief priests and the elders. 'I have sinned,' he said, 'for I have betrayed innocent blood.' 'What is that to us?' they replied. 'That is your responsibility.' So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. The chief priests picked up the coins and said, 'It is against the law to put this money into the treasury, since it is blood money.' So they decided to use the money to buy the potter's field as a burial ground for foreigners. That is why it is called the field of blood to this day. Then what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. They took the 30 silver coins, the price set on him by the people of Israel, and they used them to buy the potter's field, as the Lord commanded me."
Let's pray. What the video demonstrates is where my life went after leaving the hill there at Cincinnati Christian University. It brought me here. During this Easter series, I want us to climb the hill of Jerusalem and encounter people on this side of the cross and see what happened to them while they were there. And it's my hope that as we leave this Easter season, that what we will do is we will come away from the cross loving Jesus more. The story we want to begin with is in our text this morning of Matthew chapter 27. We begin with the story of Judas. Now, without Judas, the Easter story probably is much different. Probably only because we would have changed a name. But if I could have stopped Judas, the question I want answered is, where are you going with the rope? Maybe more importantly, when he tells me he's going to kill himself, I want to ask the question, why? Why do people decide to no longer follow Jesus? Why is this the solution that Judas feels he must make, having betrayed Christ? The reality is, in the lives of many people, it's a mystery. And I think it's in Judas's case, it's a mystery. I want to suggest 4 possible things that he may have answered and said his reason as he goes out to hang himself with the rope. Number 1, maybe he hung himself because he had no one to hang out with. If you look over at chapter 26, verse 56, Matthew telling the story of Jesus' arrest ends that last half of the verse with this phrase, "Then all the disciples deserted him and fled." The reality is Judas is not the only person who left Jesus. And now it's time. The cross is about to happen. No one is there to be found, and Judas finds himself suddenly alone. Maybe the fact that there is no one to share his time with leads Judas to feel there is nothing else he can do. Maybe that's a reason why people decide to leave their faith. We talked about the principle of association in the ministry of Jesus this morning during Sunday school. I think one of the things is that Christianity is about community. The writer of Hebrews writes to a church where people are leaving Jesus to go back to Judaism. Hebrews 10, verses 23 and following. The writer writes these words, "Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. Let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in the habit of do, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." When we come to the resurrection and the other side, we'll find the other 11 disciples are able to become back into relationship with Jesus. Is it possible that if Judas had only went and found one of the others? Is it possible if he hadn't felt that he was completely alone in his abandonment of Christ? Is it possible if the person who had found him and said, "Where are you going?" was Matthew or John or Andrew? Is it possible if one of them were the one that maybe Judas would have been able to be talked out of this heinous decision? It's a possibility. Number two, maybe he feels he got roped into something other than what he thought. The reality is, we're in a time in Palestine where everyone is waiting for Messiah. There's a determined decision of what the Messiah will be. He is supposed to be the one who has been sent from God to put everyone under his feet, to trample the nations, lead Israel in triumph over the world, and set up a kingdom that will never fail. Maybe that's the issue. Maybe he's got kingdom concern. Or maybe he's got an issue of ruling roles. Matthew 20, John and James's mother comes and says to Jesus, "When your kingdom starts, because I know it's getting close, will you make sure my boys get the best seats?" Maybe that's what Judas has been waiting for. Maybe Judas is waiting to see what he gets out of his cabinet position, since he's been with the king since the early days of his campaign. Or maybe he's just got Messiah mania. You know, he's waiting for Jesus to show up and tear the t-shirt off and say to Pilate, "What you going to do, brother, when I conquer you?" Sorry, when we didn't go to church on Sunday mornings, I got too much wrestling challenge with Gorilla Monsoon, Bobby Heenan, and Hulk Hogan. Maybe that's what it is. His idea of who Jesus is not what he expected. That's the portrayal that Martin Scorsese used of Judas in the film The Last Temptation of Christ. I don't know if that's the view in the book, but it is the view in the film. Listen to this dialogue, and I apologize to his editor for editing the dialogue even more. Jesus came and said, "Judas, my brother, I have something to tell you. Do you know why I've come to Jerusalem?" Judas, played by Harvey Keitel, says, "Yes, this is where the revolution is going to begin." Jesus says, "No, it's about Isaiah's prophecy. It said, 'He has borne our faults. He was wounded for our transgressions, yet he opened not his mouth. Despised and rejected by all, he went forward without resisting, like a lamb led to the slaughter.'" Judas, I don't understand. Judas, I am the lamb. I'm the one who's going to die. Die? You mean you're not the Messiah? I am. This can't be. If you're the Messiah, why do you have to die? Every day you got a different plan. First it's love people. Then it's you brought a sword. Now you got to die. What good could that do? We need you alive. All my life, I've been followed by voices, by footsteps, by shadows. You know what the shadow is? It's the cross. I have to die on the cross. I have to die willingly. We have to go back to the temple. And after you die, what happens then? I come back to rule. I wish there was another way, but there isn't. I have to die on the cross. I won't let you die. See, it's been suggested that what Judas is really hoping by betraying Jesus is that Jesus will go ahead and say, "All right, now it's time to fight." But the problem is, that's not who Jesus revealed himself to be. How many of us have ever considered leaving Jesus when we start to read some of the harder teachings and they're not what we thought? When Jesus doesn't look flannel graph anymore, it gets a little difficult. What do we do when Jesus doesn't really sound like our lifestyle? What do we do when Jesus doesn't sound like you can be both a member of your political party and his kingdom? What do we do when the kingdom calls for something other than what American society calls for? Do we decide to reject Jesus because he's not who we thought he was? Maybe that's why Judas is going with that rope.